I'm so nervous. I wasn't expecting it to be this nervous. Where is it? Here. No spoilers. Problem solved. Here we go. Hooray. Presenting the summary. I did make these slides only so I could use the curtain transition. I have a little script here to read out. And you have little pictures to look at too, which I drew myself. They're quite masterful, really. They took me a really long time, trust me. Take note that I had to speedrun this so much because I was just so busy this week. There was so much stuff going on. My summary is made by literally summarizing another summary because, like I said, not a lot of time. I'm sorry. I think it was a Spot Notes one. I didn't copy and paste anything though. I made it myself. I just used it as reference. But I feel like I should mention that. It's not too long. Ta-da! I love these little images. Gregor Samsa is our lovely protagonist. He was a traveling salesman, but he wakes up as a big bug. He's just like me for real. The first thing he does is talk about his work. Like, he hasn't really realized he's a bug yet, so he's just kind of wiggling around like, damn, I'm late for work. He needs to get to work. One of the first things that's introduced is that his family really relies on him for income. He's the only person who works in his whole family. He buys them the house, he buys everything. He missed the train to work. His mum specifically comes to wake him up, get him out of bed. Literally, like, he's not that late. This is an absurdist piece of literature. So some of the things that happen are like, what the hell? And one of them is that his manager boss comes in, like, I think not even that much after he's missed his bus. He's just woken up and his manager's already knocking on his door like, oi, you're late for your train. Here, there you go. And Gregor can't really speak because he is a bug, in case you hadn't noticed. It is implied to get worse as the story transitions. The family says that his voice sounds weird and they can't understand him. They react to it like it's more humanoid than it is later on in the book, so I assume it gets worse. Everyone's like guessing he's sick or something, and then his boss just starts rambling about how he sucks and he's doing bad at his job. He managed to get himself out of bed and opens the door, and everyone's like, huh, because he is a bug, indeed. Well, everyone's really scared. Most of them run off. I know the boss, like, runs away. His dad just bonks him back into his room, which really injures him in the process. This happens repeatedly. Spoiler. His dad doesn't treat him very well. Gregor becomes more bug-like very quickly throughout the story, and it's often kind of questioned how human he is, how bug-like he is, or if we're just projecting our own humanity onto him. I'm not gonna spoil something, I'll just keep reading. He becomes more bug-like, he refuses to eat his old favorite foods, which was milk, and he starts eating like rotten stuff. He also hides under the couch anytime his sister or family enters the room to not scare them, because they get super freaked out anytime they see him. It's very sad. I think there is one scene where his sister walks him when he's just chilling on the windowsill and she gets so scared. But you can tell he really cares about his family and he's trying his best. He listens to them worry about money, and his mother wants to see him, but his sister and dad don't let her. Money is very much emphasized in the story, and the whole story is pretty much from Gregor's room. so it gets very claustrophobic in a way. So Gregor starts climbing the walls just to kill time. He finds it really fun. So good for him, you know? His sister takes out furniture for him, but he gets very upset over the portrait of a woman that is on his wall. He used to make little portraits and stick them up and build the frames. This is one of those. And when the sister tries to take it away, he gets very, very upset. There is a lot of people debating over what that means. We'll talk more about it later. Seeing him, his mother faints and Gregor runs out. His father comes home and throws an apple at Gregor. He manages to get back in the room, but is severely injured and the apple stays stuck there. This is also the thing that eventually kills Gregor. His mother is very sickly, from what I understand. All of their family is very much painted to be very reliant on him and useless by themselves, in a way. Except maybe his sister. And she also tries to care for him at the start, but I'll keep reading. So everyone hates Gregor now for making them poor and everything else. They get a cleaning lady who doesn't mind Gregor, and a bunch of guys come to live with them for money. This makes them move furniture into Gregor's room, making his condition worse. This is, I'd say, a big turning point of the story when they start to get upset over him. Like, they are sick of him by this point. So they stop caring about him. His sister starts to stop feeding him. His condition's getting worse because of his injuries, especially the apple. I'm pretty sure that the apple, like, rots into him and that. The lady leaves Gregor's room open. The guys are chilling and the sister plays violin for them. He is sad, Gregor. The sister's playing violin for the guys. This is also a very, very important part of the story when Gregor comes out. And when I previously mentioned how his humanness is very questioned, this is one of the scenes that makes him look human, or attempts to, at least. I'm pretty sure he comments himself that, like, if he isn't human, then how would he be so, I guess, into the music? He's a bit, like, entranced by it in a way. So he comes closer to listen to it. But the guys don't care about the violin. But they do notice Gregor and freak out, refusing to pay the family and running away. There's a lot of debation over who these dudes are, why they're in the story in the first place. Again, we'll talk about it later. I'm sorry. I get very excited and I just want to keep talking about all these little details, but I'll try to stop myself. Everyone really, really hates Gregor now, so the sister finally says that they have to get rid of him. His father even says that if he could understand them, he'd leave of his own accord. This is my favorite slide. It's very sad what they say, and... okay. I need to keep reading. I need to stop discussing this. I'll talk about it later. His family goes yippee and kicks out the dudes and the cleaning lady who disposes of his corpse. No one is really sad about his death. They're sad about it for like 2 seconds and then like, okay, I'm over it now. It's a very sad story. The family goes on a neat ride off into the sunset. They've started earning money and choose to move to a better place. The sister apparently had a glow up. That's a very shortened and sillier version of what happens. Yeah, this was to talk about what happened a little bit. If you have anything you'd like to say on the story right now, now's a good time. My review is after this, but let's just go briefly over some things, just for fun, you know? I wasn't originally planning to, but as I read through it, there was a lot of stuff that I just wanted to talk about. So we're gonna do that here, and no one can stop me. Here we go. I talk about it later as well, but one of the main things I want to talk about is at the start, the family's completely reliant on Gregor for everything, money, and then later on, but he supports them anyway. He doesn't care, really. And then later on, the family starts working, which I don't think I can include it in the summary, actually. But his family does start working to earn money, because they have to. You know, he's a bug now. But yeah, the roles switch. But instead of how Gregor would earn money and then use that money to take care of his family, and he was very happy about it, he was really proud of it. When the family takes his place, they do not care for Gregor in the way that he cared for them. And I found that one of the saddest parts of the story. I wanted to talk about that because I think it's something important to keep in mind. It's very interesting, really. There's a lot of debation. I don't think debation is the word for it. I'm probably making that up, aren't I? Debate! That's the one. No, there's a lot of debate over what the central theme of the story is. I mean, there are a lot of themes that are present in the story, which we'll go over very soon. But what the main one is a lot of people talk about. And Kafka himself doesn't confirm anything, so he leaves everything up to interpretation, and it's very cool, which is why I chose this, because there's just so many ways to interpret it, and I was interested in what you guys thought, and how you interpret the story. It is different reading a summary to the short story itself, because especially with short stories, really everything that goes into them is really important. And it's there for a reason, which is what makes them so interesting. And since you know that all the details are interesting, it means you can focus on the details and be like, okay, well, this has to be here for a reason. What does it mean? In a way that you can't really always do with literature, which is epic. Okay. What's after this? Oh, it's my review next, isn't it? Ta-da-dum! My own perspective. Yes, I wrote a whole piece myself on my own perspective and interpretation of the story. I usually act very silly, goofy, but I do know how to speak in a smart way. I got very high grades, even though that may shock you. I studied psychology, and I get very high grades. I haven't gotten my exam results yet, actually. I'm very excited for that. Here we go. Look at my little pixel art. Oh, I really love this drawing. Someone was like, wow, I didn't know you drew pixel art. And I was like, yeah, I didn't until, like a day ago. This is, like, my first time doing pixel art, but I really like how it came out. My character always manages to come out quite nicely, though, with the colors. Something I'm very proud of. Here is my review. Let me make myself big. I actually made a glasses toggle for when I was reading this out, but it didn't work out. But I do have another toggle. I'm glad I reminded myself about this. Where's here? Ta-da! Oh, let me hold on to it. Yeah. Ta-da! Look at that! I have a little fly book. I didn't draw this. Someone made it as a free asset. I totally forgot the name of them. They said you didn't need to credit them, but I'm obviously gonna credit them because I'm just really epic. But I totally forgot their username, and I don't really have a good place to put it in. But after, when I put this on YouTube, I will put the credit down in the description. If anyone's watching this from YouTube, go check that. If you are watching this not from YouTube, when it releases, if you'd like the asset, you're welcome to go check it out and steal it. Or just give them a follow. They seem cool. Okay, here we go. I feel like I should be putting glasses on. I don't even wear glasses. One of the most interesting parts of researching Metamorphosis was the different perspectives on the story. Something completely left up to the audience. My personal interpretation on my first reading was that of alienation and abandoning those who are no longer of use to you. The rate at which the family begins to distance Gregor and almost gaslight themselves into believing he's just a bug, despite him having some clear human tendencies, is something I don't believe comes from their cruelty towards Gregor, but as a kindness towards themselves. The truth can be too much to bear, and with their family situation, it just wouldn't be possible for them to facilitate an environment where a bug with the soul of a human could thrive in, especially when they can't even understand him. I found the most tragic part of the story to be in Gregor's helplessness and desire to do things he once could, complete his old goals, like how he wanted his sister to study violin, and how his first instinct was going to work. When his boss came to tell him off, he could barely talk and loses the ability to at all later on. Again, I'm not really sure how much he can talk in the beginning. I always assumed that it was like somewhat audible but kind of bug-like at the start and then gets worse. But after all my research, I'm kind of questioning that into he could never talk. It was always just little weird noises. I'm not saying the family could understand him even at the start, but yeah, completely loses the ability to it all later on. One of the main reasons his family could pretend he's no longer Gregor. In other words, Gregor is a good bug and he didn't deserve the hate. Justice for bugs. When I first read the ending, I was a little confused. I was sad about how quickly the family disowned Gregor and moved on. While it was technically a happy ending, it really didn't feel like one. Gregor never gets a happy ending. He never improves, and he can't. I cannot imagine him being able to live a good life in his situation with the family's budget and their grossed out responses any time they see him. But in the end, I suppose it is good that at least the rest of the family could. Me personally, I would love a Gregor. In fact, I would prefer if all my siblings were big bug, but I guess the Samsa family just doesn't get him like I do. I forgot I had that in there. Ignore that last bit for me. I mean, I'm a fly. Isn't my whole family supposed to be flies? Like in canon? Hypothetically. I think my perspective does come a lot of the fact that I myself have not been very abundantly rich, so I can understand the family's predicament, because, you know, if they were billionaires, they could build him a whole sanctuary, but they don't have that kind of stuff. None of them even work without Gregor providing money until later on. And I thought that was sad. I think they should have given Gregor more respect, but yeah, like I said, it seemed more as a kindness to themselves. If they completely thought the whole time that Gregor is a real human, imagine how much harder that would have been for them, you know? Also, I think it's to do with familiarize, oh no, big word, making the weird stuff more familiar to you. If you see a bug, it's easier to make it familiar to you by thinking, yeah, it's a bug, it's not my brother, you know? And that also comes across with the readers. Kafka never wanted Gregor to be perceived as like a roach, but everyone perceives him as a roach because it's easier to just see him as one. It's better for marketing. If you see a roach with a face of a man, you'll be like, oh yeah, that's Gregor. Which I don't think is what Kafka would have wanted. I think he said himself that the bug isn't to be seen, but it's very common now to depict him, which I think is a transformation to the familiar, which is something I have learned about in psychology as well. When people remember things, they are likely to transform them into a version that's more familiar to themselves within their own memory. So it fits into their schema, which is basically big group of information. It's easier to just put something into a pre-existing schema instead of making a new one. I don't know what this thing is. Just put it in with insects. And then when you see an insect, you'll be like, oh, Gregor. It's a little lesson for you. That was just my little rambling. There's a lot of stuff I think of talking about as I start talking now. Okay, no, I'll stop talking about that because I talk about it later on. I'll leave it for then. Next. Presenting other perspectives. Like I said before, this is by far one of those most interesting parts of the story. I did take it as what's usually the most common interpretation. Maybe I should have scripted this out more. I have like none of this scripted. The only scripted parts are the review and the summary. So if I'm stumbling a little, That's why. They can be going on at the same time. The discussion is mostly about which would be the main one that Kafka was trying to get across. This is also why a lot of people find the book so confusing, because it's just so incredibly vague. Which is confusing, but it also means you can do whatever you want with it, really. Nothing's disproven. You're all correct. Isn't that great? I think that's very, very interesting and cool. So the first one I'm talking about, they go from like most surprise. Well, not really. I guess the ones I get the most, or the ones I found most familiar or easy to understand. So alienation, the story is about feeling disconnected from your fellow humans, viewing yourself as something inhuman, like no longer human type stuff. Yeah. If you are interested in books about heavy alienation, there you go. There's your recommendation. No longer human. It's very, very dark. Trigger warning for everything ever if you're gonna read it. It's very depressing. I enjoyed it though. Well, enjoy is a big word for that book. It's a feeling that can only be felt through reading No Longer Human. It's not like kinning, but there's some sort of melancholy feeling of familiarity in it. I think that's a good way to put it. Though that might be just me. I haven't done a lot of research on other interpretations of the book. This is portrayed by Gregor's transformation and how his family no longer treats him as an equal from it. How something may change a person, and though they feel mostly the same, the people around them grow distant due to you not fitting in with their image of you. Yeah, this was very strong in the book. Gregor he no longer fits the family's image of him. This is what causes him to be alienated by them. There's different forms of alienation, like alienation from yourself and your own idea of yourself, or like a big drastic change. But this is the alienation that I would say Metamorphosis focuses on. The working standard of the 21st century. I think this one is the most popular reading of the story, which is the stories about the harsh work ethics of our society. Money and jobs are a very big part of the story. Gregor carries the entire family's income on his back. None of the family works until after his transformation. When Gregor wakes up, he immediately tries to go to work despite his condition, and his boss fires him for missing just one day. Gregor has a very strong sense of responsibility for everyone and wants to work to support them. His transformation represents also the de-individuation of our work culture, treating everyone as bugs. This is a very big theme of it. I personally felt that alienation, if I had to choose one, would have been the main theme in my own reading of it. Again, there's no correct answers. You should always remember that with these kinds of things. His responsibility also is really like, isn't it called like nuclear family? By the way, if I stumble over my words, I think it's worth mentioning for people who are watching this like off YouTube. I'm Italian. I have been living in England for a very, very, very long time, but I don't know, maybe that has some effect on my words. Just mentioning. Please forgive me. ESL. I feel like this is one of the most straightforward interpretations of it as well. Like, they really, really love talking about money and how they're gonna earn money. All of Gregor's sense of worth is his responsibility in supporting his family. When that's taken away from him, he immediately loses all worth, which is kind of a counter to, work isn't everything. I think this story kind of questions that in a lot of ways. You know what, I'll keep moving. I'll stop stalling. I'm sorry. This is very, very similar to the last one, but I thought I'd separate them anyway. The family loved Gregor because he was useful and helpful. Literally the same thing. They abandon him because he loses value and becomes a hindrance. By the end of the story, I said this before as well, the roles have changed. Gregor supports the family by providing money. The rest are pretty much leeches. The Sam's family makes money without Gregor. but don't support him and call him useless. It's very ironic. They are very not self-conscious, which is one of the biggest reasons why I don't like the family. I think it is a general consensus that the family sucks, but how much they suck does change depending on how you view the story, and that's really interesting. It's, again, there is more about it later. This was very, very interesting. Watch Tale Foundry's video. It goes into it a lot more, and I love Tale Foundry. I basically tried to watch like every Metamorphosis related video and review when I was making this, so I just threw them all in my watch later. I didn't even notice that one of them was from Tale Foundry, so when I was watching them all and he came on, I was like, oh my god, it's this guy! And he had a very interesting view on it. I haven't heard this perspective anywhere outside of his video, so I would highly recommend it. It's very interesting, and the way he talks it's very realistic. He knows what he's on about, basically. Great channel. The story centers around a loss of ability. The story shows an unromanticized version of disability. I don't know if romanticized was the best word for it. I think, now that I'm thinking about it, unidealized is a much better word for it. Stories about disabilities, even when they try to portray them realistically, they often will cut out the bits of the story that suck for disabled people and try to show it in a more positive light. He thought that this is about how grotesque it can be in a way that is unfiltered. Being able to do the things you had planned and would do usually, such as work or speech. The family's behavior is understandable as taking care of disabilities can be very difficult and uncomfortable. This was one of the things I was talking about before, with different interpretations can interpret the family differently. I thought this was a very, very interesting way to think about it, so I really had to include it. Again, watch the video. I will put it in the description of the YouTube. Especially with physical disabilities, it will cause the caretaker to end up isolating themselves, really, because of, their duty, which is hard. It's very hard. I'm not gonna say I have personal experience in the field, but I would imagine it being very, very difficult work. And especially with their budget, as I said before, since he couldn't provide their money, they didn't have much to do to support him, really. Watch the video. It's great. I love you, Tale Foundry. As I said before, his loss of ability was one of the most sad things for me. Feminism. A question mark isn't because I doubt it. This was the most surprising perspective for me. By far. When I first heard something about a feminist reading of the story, I was like, huh? How? And then I eventually managed to find something that actually explained it. And damn, that's cool. Gregor's sister is the real main character. That's the main point of the feminist reading. Gregor not providing for the family allows her to become independent. The end scene, where she's grown up and more beautiful, supports this in a way. The story is about how to let women shine. Men need to step away and let them, which is very, very cool and interesting. Kafka couldn't make a direct feminist work, so he tried to hide it, is the main theory as to why he didn't just write feminist literature. Here at the bottom, Kafka's biographer, Rainer Stach, states that his life was full of incessant womanizing from Wikipedia. Yeah, so the main reason I have some questions, I guess, over this reading is Kafka himself, not the theory, I suppose you could call it. Kafka was not your raging feminist. He did very much cheat on someone he was engaged to with their friend. Feminist Kafka. Oh. But it does fit the story very, very well. I will say, I'm not gonna deny that at all. It's very interesting, especially. I just think it's unlikely more due to Kafka's character. Also, a lot of people mention how, well, this is focused on, how we should let women shine, men need to step away and let them. At the end, a lot of people talk about the scene where they say that the sister has grown very strong and beautiful. In that same scene, the rest of the family, they say that, yeah, you should totally go find yourself a husband now that you're like this. Would Kafka really include that if this was a feminist story about letting women be independent? I really love this interpretation. It's probably the most interesting out of all of them for me. Anyone watching this on YouTube? Ooh, yup. Hello! Did learning about the new perspectives change your own perspective of the story? Because for me, it was less about changing perspective and more about understanding my own perspective. I always kind of felt that the story was about alienation, but when I first read it, I was so confused. The whole story is quite baffling because it is an absurdist piece of literature, like I said before, and none of it makes complete sense, and it's supposed to be like that, and that's okay. It allows for different interpretations, this media, so it's epic. Thumbs up. I did understand that it was quite a sad story more than anything, but that's all I really had to go off of. When I did more research, I did think, yes, okay, alienation, that is what I mainly focused on. About the book, yes, these about sections are very, very short. I'll tell you that now. It was really an echo chamber when I was trying to dig into this book about how it was made and stuff. It's the kind of thing where you'll do research, and then as you're doing research, you just keep getting the same information over and over again, no matter where you turn. So eventually you just kind of, you're like, okay, fine. I did try to include as much as I could, but it's really not very much. Kafka's a very mysterious individual. Whoop. The what? I mentioned this before. The thing Gregor turns into was never classified as a specific bug, despite often being thought of as a roach. He actually hated the idea of the thing being drawn, like, a lot. Now it's on most covers. The German word he used for the bug is something similar to vermin, and also applies to most rodent creatures, though he does have more bug-like features. Everyone is confused by the story. I talked about this before, but there is so much left made for interpretation. This gives everyone a different experience and many, many discussions, which is why I chose it. Autobiography. I didn't really want to put this in perspectives, but Metamorphosis is often thought of to be at least somewhat autobiographical. The House of Gregor is very similar to Kafka's childhood home, and it's also thought to represent Kafka's own feeling of alienation from the world, and especially his own family. Kafka isn't as sad as a lot of people perceive and talk about him, but I think thinking of the story as just an absurdist autobiography is really, really limiting. It makes you take it a lot more at face value, I think, which is quite dull, which is why I didn't include it in perspectives. I don't think he's confirmed or denied this. I'm pretty sure the whole book is left up to interpretation. Yes, it is. I confirm this now. About Kafka, now, like I said, not much is known about Kafka, but here's just some funny things, really. Now that I think back on it, all the things that I put in here are kind of ridiculous. Enjoy! Kafka's embarrassing stories, I suppose. Max Brod. Max Brod was an epic guy and really deserves a mention. I really wanted to include him. He refused to burn Kafka's works after his death against his wishes and published both a bunch of stories Kafka did want publicized. I don't remember what all of these were. I think The Trial was among them. He was Kafka's real number one fan, though it's estimated that 90% of Kafka's work did indeed get burned away by his own hands, which is very sad. But it is said that Kafka didn't finish most of his work. The very few stories that are published are probably, maybe, his only finished ones. So I would think that most of the stuff that got burned was unfinished work. But it's still very sad. Career. Kafka is often thought of as some miserable writer, but he was actually some guy. And a pretty successful lawyer. He worked mostly up until his death of tuberculosis. I said mostly, but because most people say this. There are some people who say he stopped a couple years before dying of tuberculosis, but there's also some people who say he worked right up until he was completely unable to, and then died. He suffered with tuberculosis for a couple years. He seemed pretty, I guess, ready for it when his time came, from what I understood. Still very sad. While his main income and serious job was being a lawyer, he wrote pretty constantly. He had a lot of work, and we are not going to be able to ever see 90% around of that work because he burnt it all, because he is evil. Love. Okay, yeah, this is what I was referring to in the feminist interpretation of the book. I mentioned it before, but Kafka sucked with romance. He went after multiple women trying to be some romantic Rizzler, but not a single woman he dated was happy about it. I saw multiple things saying none of the women he was with were happy. He was determined to keep them unhappy, or something like that, which is honestly hilarious. A lot didn't even like his writing. His main hubby, Felice, they were together and then broke up and then went back together, from what I understand. And then they broke up again and then she married someone else. She didn't like his writing. She thought it sucked, really. He never got married but was engaged 3 times. One of those was Felice, who he cheated on with her friend. Not much of a feminist image I'm getting. I'm not trying to invalidate the feminist reading. Like I said, it's very, very interesting. Really, I'm not sure if that's what he was going for. Here's some open questions. From what you've heard, this also goes to people on YouTube. You're welcome to answer these. I'll also give my own thoughts on these. There we go. How does the family change, and do they change? Some people interpret it as his family doesn't change at all, they just reveal their true colors across the story. I think it's less so revealing their true colors and more Ninjago revealing hidden potential. I think potential is very different from inner person. The feminist retelling of the story does make him seem like a lot of a worse guy, especially in the different discussion around his relationship with his sister. I think he is just trying his best, personally. That's my interpretation of Gregor's moral code. I don't think, while his attitude toward his sister can be a bit controlling and overbearing, I think it's more from a place of love and wanting to have a good life. He really wants her to go to an academy for violin because she plays violin. As far as the story says, he didn't force her to start playing violin at all. That's something she wanted to do herself. He's just supporting her dream. If he forced her to start playing violin and then tried to make her go to the violin school, that's very, very different. In the way that the story presents it, I would say it's more from a place of pride, in a good way, and wanting to see his sister flourish, which there is nothing bad about. Go Gregor. But it might be bug-to-bug sympathy. How human is Gregor? That's very debatable. Also because of our own, we are rating this as humans. Bugs cannot form coherent thoughts and can only think of real events happening currently and presently. They do not have abstract thought, as far as I'm aware from my psychology studies. Interpretation of the framed woman. This is way more interesting than I originally thought. When I first read the story, I didn't even really notice the framed woman, if I'm being honest. But Gregor's hobby back when he was a human was that he would just cut out pictures of women and then create frames for them from magazines, which sounds really weird and freaky now, but it was normal back then. You know, it's like what I do with Ninjago posters in my room. The really interesting thing about the framed woman is how she can be changed to fit with literally every single different perspective of the story very easily. Let me go back to show you this, because when I realized this, it was like, whoa, that's cool. We're ignoring optimism. That's more an interpretation of the ending, okay? But for feminism, that scene could represent him not wanting to let go of his hold and power over women. For disability, he doesn't, since he made it himself, maybe he doesn't want to let go of his knowledge of his own ability to create things with his life, with usefulness. Similar to that, his ability to create things. He remembers being able to make things, being useful, and the portrait represents that for him. His connection to the world, his human self, his humanity, he feels, is represented by the portrait, and he doesn't want to let go of his humanity. What were the lodges for? This is... yeah, the lodges are one of the biggest things that baffles me. I'd be interesting to hear what you guys think of the lodges. They are only in it for a pretty short amount of time. I think it is one of the only things I saw talking about the lodges said that they represent society. So if this was Kafka's absurdist autobiography, then his family represents how he feels himself perceived by his family, and then the lodges is how he feels perceived by society as a whole, which makes sense. I approve of that. I said this before. Has your view changed? Have you, even for you who haven't read it before, what do you think of the story without even reading it? That would be interesting to know. And if you have read it, how has that changed? That's pretty much everything. Like I said, we don't have that many people, so we can't have much of an open discussion in that way. I hope you're enjoying it anyway. I hope everyone enjoyed that. I hope that also this will inspire people to join us for next week's media thingy. I wasn't expecting to, but as I was going through this, I kept just wanting to ramble about certain aspects of the story, which is the pro to having done so much research. I should probably end it so that I have less to edit. But thank you for stopping by. Oh boy, I'm leaving now. Adios. I should have made a new ending screen as well as starting screen. I guess starting screen's all you get. Sorry. Bye bye, Kai. It was fun. I'm glad you enjoyed. Interesting. Yes. If you found this very intriguing, I would recommend reading yourself. And come back to me with your own interpretation. I'd love to hear. Adios. I go now. Well, now you're making me want to talk about this. We're coming back. I was trying to eat my sweets in peace, but you're dragging me back here. Encore! The disability and feminism interpretations were by far the most interesting for me. I had not thought about those when I was reading it. Tale Foundry's video, Tale Foundry always is just incredible. They're on YouTube. I don't know if it's just me, but I very, very much enjoy learning about new perspectives. Oh, I'll put it in the chat. I think their name is Tale Foundry. I'll put a link to it when I post it on YouTube. But yes, they basically go over stories and interpret them. It's very cool. I don't watch them often, but when I do, I always enjoy it. Or they also do ones on just different themes. So yes, I'm promoting them. I've been promoting a couple people already, haven't I? Vote for Holt and Tale Foundry are the main ones. I love you, vote for Holt. If you're interested in it now, you're welcome to read it for yourself and see which interpretation you felt suited the story the most and stuck out to you. There's no time like the present though, you know? Okay, can I end now? When do I get to go? I have my sweets here. You can end now? Okay. Don't worry, I'm happy to come back. I won't pop up with thoughts again. Boo! I do not approve of this. You can continue to pop up with thoughts, but you can put them in the Discord server! Exclamation mark Discord. Wow! Plug! Okay, I'm going now. I have the end screen on. I'm leaving. Die. You'll get there. You'll get there. You can figure it out, right? Discord. Yes. Join. Yeah, you should totally join the Discord. I can't believe you have never joined it. Oh, I didn't know that was possible. Yeah, it talks about it in the auto message. It mentions it there. If it ever pops up. It hasn't come up today. I'll join a second time, don't worry. Okay. I'll see you there. I'm out for realsies this time. But yeah, I'm very happy to keep discussing it. We can continue on Discord anytime. Beep.